Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of So I've Been Told. I am your host, Adam Kramer, and this week my guest is Adam Goren of Adam and His Package and Fracture and Armalite. This guy's been doing this punk rock thing for a long time, and we had a good time talking over Skype. That's why it's a couple of moments during the conversation where the sound gets a little choppy, but hopefully you can still understand enough to know what's going on. Adam took some time out of his weekend a couple weeks ago to chat with me, and I really enjoyed his perspective. He's somebody who's older than me, and I'm creeping up on 30, but as someone who's creeping up on 30, it's cool to hear someone who's a little bit further along in life than I am, who even has a real regular job right now, but still sees so much value in punk and DIY culture. And I really hope you guys enjoy this interview. And before I play the interview, you are going to hear Anarchy Means I Litter by Adam and His Package. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of So I've Been Told. I am your host, Adam Kramer, and this week my guest is Adam Goren of Adam and His Package and Fracture and Armalite. This guy's been doing this punk rock thing for a long time, and we had a good time talking over Skype. That's why it's a couple of moments during the conversation where the sound gets a little choppy, but hopefully you can still understand enough to know what's going on. Adam took some time out of his weekend a couple weeks ago to chat with me, and I really enjoyed his perspective. He's somebody who's older than me, and I'm creeping up on 30, but as someone who's creeping up on 30, it's cool to hear someone who's a little bit further along in life than I am, who even has a real regular job right now, but still sees so much value in punk and DIY culture. And I really hope you guys enjoy this interview. And before I play the interview, you are going to hear Anarchy Means I Litter by Adam and His Package. I'm excited to talk to you. I've mostly talked to people I know on this podcast, and I was up real late one night, and I was listening to Adam and His Package, and I had a crazy idea. I was like, I'll send him an email and see if he answers, thinking you wouldn't. I wasn't sure how active you were with that website, since you're not really doing anything anymore, so...
Well, thank you. I am flattered, by your interest. It's very nice.
Yeah, man. So, I don't know, have you heard, there's a podcast called Turned Out a Punk that Damian Abraham, the singer from Fucked Up, does. Have you heard that at all?
I have not heard that. I know who Damian Abraham and Fucked Up are, but I've not heard the podcast.
Okay. Well, basically what I've been doing is a lot of ripping him off. And,
okay.
Just kind of talking to people and hearing their story about how they got involved in punk rock and playing in bands.
So we'll just start back then. How did you first get into punk rock?
I think when I was really little, so the friend that I had who lived across the street from us growing up, his older brother had like a mixtape of the Clash and the Sex Pistols. It was probably the first Clash record, the first Sex Pistols record, and maybe two other things, although the songs were all like sort of split up as if it was a mixtape, but I think it was probably only those two albums. So I think musically, I was pretty young. I mean, I'd always liked the Beatles and stuff like that. But then I think that when it sort of like became something more than just like another band, some of the friends that I went to elementary school with, who are still close friends until today, not until today, as if today we just had a major falling out, but somehow we all kind of got interested in the same music. I think that, we were kids who felt like we were a little bit weird, but I don't know, I'd like to think we were sort of smart, and I think that we sort of just became interested in punk rock music, and we kind of all discovered through it kind of at the same time, but also, kind of like with having, 5 or 6 people's feelers out about hearing, oh my gosh, did you hear Minor Threat? Oh my gosh, wow, have you heard this? And that, I think that we kind of started to branch out. We grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and I think eventually made some connections with people who lived in actual Philadelphia, so we kind of ended up going there and finding record stores and then meeting people. But for a long time, it was there's probably a good crew of like 13 or 14 of us who would kind of play revolving bands that we'd be in for a little bit and break up, and then sort of shuffle around members. And I think that we kind of just all, there was something about it that resonated with us. And then I think that there's something about sort of like adolescent angst that makes kids like us sort of interested initially, but then I think that there was sort of another kind of 1-2 punch with, whoops, did I just do something? Oh, am I still here?
Yeah, you're still here. You're a little blurry, but you're here.
Oh, good. Okay. So I think that, that there's something that's just sort of like the usual teen angst stuff, but I think kind of like the kind of next step was that we saw people who were probably a little bit older than us downtown who would kind of just put on shows. They would rent out the basement of the church. There was a place called or kind of a collective called the Cabbage Collective.
Okay.
And they would set up shows for punk bands, and for us that just seemed like a really not only nice place to hang out and meet interesting people and trade sort of music, but also I think it was empowering to us to sort of see people do things, and that it sort of was empowering to see that, oh, you know what, you can actually do stuff instead of just wait for other people to do it for you. So I think that we kind of, that was a little bit of a boost to us as sort of 17 or 18-year-olds that, and kind of, I feel like it kind of got a little bit specialized. That some of us in the sort of group of people we were interested in booking shows. Some of us were interested in sort of like starting a record label and kind of learning about that. And there was sort of at that time like Maximum Rock and Roll was kind of the magazine where you would find out about new bands and see ads and contact people who were booking shows all over the place. So I think that kind of started it. And then there's also the really catchiness of the Misfits and stuff like that too.
Around what year was it that you really, what like time frame was it that you really started getting involved in that scene in Philly?
I think that we all were sort of playing in our parents' basements, probably 1989-ish, but then I think probably 1991 and 92 we kind of, I think that we were a little bit more mobile and able to take cars and trains places. So I think that probably around then we really started kind of being able to, integrate with other folks who weren't sort of from the immediate vicinity.
Okay. And Fracture was one of your early bands. Was that the first serious band? Did you guys do any touring?
We did two tours that for us felt big. We toured with our friends band Franklin, and these were all sort of the people who were in this kind of extended group of people where we lived. And I think in the summer of 1993 and 1995 we did the first time a U.S. tour in like 3.5 weeks, and then in 1995 did like a United States, all over the place in Canada summer tour. And I mean, these were not, when you say serious, like no one was interested, but I think that it did. I mean, for us, like that was, I mean, I think back on it, and that those trips were, they were. I mean, I guess when you're sort of an adolescent, like your teenagers and early 20s, that there's a lot of informative kind of stuff that happens then, and I think that for us as young people to go around and see our huge, pretty diverse country, maybe not in seeing the punk rock scene, maybe it wasn't all that particularly diverse, but like, it's a huge country, and it's so varied that, like, for us, being able to do that just like with your 8 best friends, like a gaggle of idiots doing dumb things and laughing a lot and having petty, annoying arguments, but like we had a great time. And I mean, I think that it kind of just like sort of reinforced that kind of feeling of late adolescence of like, me and my friends versus the world, we can do anything, and there's something that's really enjoyable about that, and I think does sort of nurture strong bonds between people, and those people are still very, very, very dear to me.
For sure. Now, did you guys put anything out on a record label, or was that everything was DIY at that point?
So we put out one of my closest friends, Brian, who I met in first grade. He played in the band called Franklin, and I think before he was in Franklin, definitely. He started a record. He was always a huge sort of fan of Discord records and kind of was very up on sort of how, and Discord was really amazingly sort of like generous in terms of like information and how you put out a record and what do you do. And so, he sort of kind of was the sort of spearheaded kind of like the group of us kind of, we kind of kidded ourselves, and I think we thought that it was kind of like a collectively run record label, but he really sort of like spearheaded doing it. So he had put out a couple records for his old band, and we put out a Fracture 7-inch, and then there was, I think we made like 300 of them, and I mean, for us, I mean, it's so fun, and so like not knowing really what to do with them once you make them, and we were not, nor are we sort of like businessy people, so we never. So I think we ended up like there was a party and we probably had them for maybe a couple months and still had a lot of them. So I think there was a party and we ended up like throwing them up in the air, and most of them fell under the influence of gravity and landed on the ground and probably got stepped on. But for some reason I don't know, we didn't really do much with them. But then we put out another 7-inch with a fellow who was a little bit older than us but ran a record label that had put out a Franklin 7-inch, so we sort of kind of just knew him by association, I guess. And then there was sort of like a reinterest of our bass player Jeb and Brian again, and we kind of all did try and make this collectively run record label called the Energy Network, and we put out the Fracture 12-inch, and I think we put that out shortly before our last tour in 1995, and then our singer and friend Chris moved to Washington State, which made band playing a little tough, so we sort of called it a day, but we felt, we really liked the last record that we put out, and then eventually, several years later, No Idea put out like a CD discography and an LP discography of all the stuff. But before that, I don't think it was anything that anyone other than us. And I mean, when we played on tour, there were very, very few people who even saw us. There were fewer people who cared. So I don't think it. I think we ended up pressing maybe 1,000, and maybe over. I don't know. I don't know when or if we ever even sold all of them. So, but I mean, for us, like, it's awesome to to make a record with your friends, and it's very, very cool. And we kind of paid, like, at that time, Fracture sounded nothing like the bands on Gravity Records. That there was something that was really attractive about the aesthetic of sort of like, and I'm not sure if I removed that. I don't know if sort of Gravity Records is a thing that people remember, but like it was a very sort of like they would construct these like handmade record covers that were all sort of personalized, and so we really liked that. So we ended up like painting the record covers and then sticking on these stickers and stamping them and silk screening and doing all this stuff that like seems grossly inefficient and silly, but like I don't know, we loved it. And
oh yeah,
I mean it's it was we had a lot of fun doing it, and I think like as again I think that's sort of our kind of thing as a kid or a young old kid or whatever we were. Like I think that's something that I feel like about punk that I try and hopefully somehow instill in my kids, even if it's not something that I mean, they may not have the experience, I hope they don't have the experience of driving around the van without seatbelts for a summer or two, because that was, dumb, but like, I think, kind of that sense of empowerment that you can do stuff, and you don't have to just sit and be a spectator, that I think that's a lesson that I'm so fortunate to have had, in addition to just having all the time with, I think that, like, seeing the world is awesome, and seeing the world or the country or even the city you live in with friends is a great way to do it.
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah,
some of my favorite memories are doing the same type of things with putting together the DIY CD packagings and all that type of stuff is it's the best thing in the world. Is just having fun with friends doing stuff like that. Now, when did you start kind of making the transition? Had you already gotten into doing the programming type stuff before Fracture had ended?
I think towards the end of Fracture, our other guitar player, Mark Scott, had this friend named Andrew who had written these songs on a thing called a music sequencer, which kind of enabled you to kind of overlap lots of different sounds and kind of had a drum machine built into it. And he would just like make these cassettes of these funny songs, and not only like funny, but they were. I thought that they were, and still think that they were like great songs that stand on their own. So I think I had gotten one probably around the time that Fracture broke up. But then when Fracture broke up, I still sort of like had the hankering to write songs, and instead of just writing them on the guitar, the sequencer kind of enabled me to write and construct whole songs on it. So I kind of did that, but it just sort of started kind of and I had a lot of free time, as someone I guess at that age has, and I really loved playing songs. Like I would just stay up till all hours of the night with headphones on, cackling and writing, silly songs. And yeah, so that's kind of how it started. And I didn't, I made a couple songs for friends and wrote songs for their birthdays or whatever, and I was still very friendly with, our friend's band Franklin. Still was pretty active, and they were active for a really long time. They were totally, at least from my humble perspective, a very underappreciated band when they were around.
Is that
but,
band a band that I can still find on the internet somewhere?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Actually, I think all the stuff Brian, the same Brian who I've been friends with forever, he made a website, like a blog thing called GoKidGo.org.
Okay.
And that pen looks humongous.
Just write it down so I can check it out and put it in the show notes.
Yeah. And so I think he probably posted all the Franklin stuff because he kind of made posts just kind of about the whole, essentially kind of talking about a lot of the stuff that you're asking me about. Mm-hmm. And, they were still my best friends. And so I would go with them to the shows and whatever, and then it kind of just started. I was like, oh, yeah, they were like, oh, you should play one of your dumb songs before we play. And it was just kind of fun because, again, and I think it kind of borders sometimes into not great attitude maybe by me at some points, but kind of having that feeling of it's just you and your friends and you're goofing around and having fun. So I would play songs and sometimes people would hate it, but it was that again, I think that there can be problems if you kind of put the feeling to the extreme, but having the feeling of it's me and my friends and we whatever, we're not hurting anybody, we're doing. So I think that it gave me a little bravado that I probably don't genuinely have, and so I would play, songs, and sometimes people would hate it, but we didn't care because who cares? It was fun, and so I think that's kind of how it started. And I would just play through their bass player's bass amp and just plug the sequencer in and yelp along, and I set up a tour for them because I had kind of set up the Fracture and Franklin tours, and so when I went along on the tour just for fun, I'd play every now and again on the tour, and I don't know, it was fun. And then when I got home, I don't remember exactly what the sequence was. That's funny. But I had at some point somewhere around in there, I got certified to teach high school, right. But after my student teaching experience was really exhausting and rough and did not make me want to teach, and so I needed a break from that. I just found it to be a really discouraging experience, and so I kind of just went on tour by myself. I was like, I'll just set up a tour for Adam and his package stuff, and I did, and somehow I was able to kind of keep doing it, and I kind of just kept doing it and did it for longer than I would have anticipated it possible.
Yeah, how many years were you on the road as Adam and his package?
I think for about 7. I mean, not 7 straight, but I would be on tour for a few weeks at the beginning, home for a couple weeks, on tour for a couple months, home for a couple months. So consistently for 7 years, but not through all 7 years.
Yeah, no, you were just working odd jobs in between tours at that point?
Yeah, pretty much. I at some point, I had a great job where I was a coffee packager for a wholesale coffee roasting place.
Nice.
So in the morning, we would pack up coffee, and I've never had anybody ever talk to me until I was in that job, and I would go around, and I smelled so good. I smelled like coffee, and then in the afternoon you'd go and deliver these big, huge 20-pound bags of different flavored coffee, and it was so that was fun. I think at some point along the way, it ended up being that I toured enough, and since it was just me, it was sort of a financially viable thing. So I think that there would be odd jobs at some points, and sometimes I would work in my dad's office, but somehow it worked. I feel incredibly fortunate to have had that opportunity too.
Yeah, for sure. Now, were you still based out of the Philadelphia area that whole time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Are you still in the Philadelphia area?
Yeah, I live about 4 minutes from where my parents live. Where I grew up.
Cool.
So, and it's just northwest of Philadelphia, right outside the city. And
what town?
Yeah. It is called Erdenheim.
Okay.
Some might call it Nerdenheim.
So were your parents always supportive of your musical endeavors and the whole punk rock thing? They got it?
My parents, I am biased, but they are really, really, really wonderful people.
Cool.
They're both very different from each other, but they are, I think that they knew that growing up, I think a lot of people kind of feel surprised when they're like, oh, your parents were supportive of that, but I think that it's not, they knew, they know me. I'm not I'm a kind of compulsive person, and I'm pretty responsible, so I think that it's not like they saw me doing something that was totally insane and stupid, and I think that they, I had finished school, I'd learned not learned, but at least learned, as the state would say, to be a teacher. So, I think that they felt like there was some sort of, I wasn't just going off and, doing who knows what. So, yeah, they were supportive, and I think that they, for each of their kids, they're incredibly, emotionally generous people, and I think what they want is they want their kids to be happy and to do stuff and be functional, good humans. So hopefully I haven't let them down in some of those things. So.
Cool, that's awesome. So at what point did you kind of wrap things up with Adam and his package, and what was your reasoning for ending it?
In 2003, I had done a U.S. tour, and by this time it was towards the end of 7 years of doing it. I think that I noticed there would be shows where I played a lot. I don't know how many shows, but a lot, and I'd heard the songs so much, and there were parts towards the end where I would play shows, and it just felt a little bit disingenuous. I'd be playing these shows, and the songs kind of ceased being songs to me, and I felt like I was doing more a monologue of just doing these songs. I had introduced the songs so many times, where it felt like I was just all kind of canned. I would say the same introduction, because the song was still about the same thing, And there were just shows that I would play where I'd feel oh my gosh, I was totally thinking about whatever. That wasn't, and I was just didn't feel like I was present in doing, and so I think a matter of that. I think that it was a combination of that, a combination of kind of being tired of traveling. I love being able to see the world, seeing the world in not the whole world, but a lot of the world in this sort of way, meeting people who are kind of interested in the same types of things you are, but live, sometimes halfway around the world is a really amazing way to see the world. But I think we got to a point where I was kind of tired of traveling. I think, I had some relatives who I was really close to who were getting older, as people sometimes do. And they, I think I missed them, and I wanted to spend time with them. And I also think, in terms of writing songs, I think I was kind of I wasn't moved to do it very often, and it kind of started to feel like an obligation. And I know that sounds really babyish, because it's dude, an obligation, to, get to travel and play shows, which is awesome. But I felt kind of the combination with that was already in the background. And then I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which was something that was certainly an adjustment, and, not anything. I mean, it's something to take care of, but it wasn't something that was if you continue playing music, you will be dead. It wasn't like that. But at the same time, I was I probably get some dependable health insurance would be something that'd be a good idea. And also, my wife and I were having our daughter Ruby in December, so that was kind of coming along as well, and it just kind of felt like, yeah, this is a good time. I should just play a last show in Philadelphia and have fun doing it, and because I think that it just didn't feel great to kind of go through the motions of playing a show and being like, yeah, I think that's the way to describe it in terms of like feeling like sometimes it was like a monologue. And I think like the things that I loved about it the most was sort of like the dialogue of having a show and being at a punk show and doing stuff. And so I think it was time to stop, and I totally feel like I did it at completely the right time, and yeah.
And then what year was that?
That was 2003.
Okay. Now, you spent some time on Hopeless Records, which is actually how I originally first heard your music. I saw the undercover funny music video on one of those Hopeless, like the compilation. It was on a DVD.
That is some busy stuff. That video.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in there. So how was your experience with Hopeless? I think they're kind of I guess they're kind of a bigger label now than they were back then. But was it a generally good experience? Did it help?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so that was the first label that I did a record for where I wasn't friends with the people before doing the record. Okay. Like, no idea. Those are people I still think incredibly fondly of, although I don't talk to them as frequently as I did. But like, those were kind of they were friends. Like, they were kind of peers who were putting out punk records. They were just really exceptionally awesome at it, and I think like I was interested in sort of like like I knew Hopeless Records was a sort of a bigger record label at that time, and I knew Dillinger 4 was on them, and I absolutely loved them, and and I remember talking to those guys sort of before I kind of made a decision, and but the folks at Hopeless Records are, it's kind of, I think like, maybe coming from different places, but those guys are absolutely stand-up people. There was a guy named Darren who worked there for a while, and Lewis who runs Hopeless Records, and a guy named Al who, they were always super supportive and like, kind of just down-to-earth people, and I think good-hearted. Like, I know that they'd sort of started Subsidy, I can't remember if it was like just before or just after I kind of did a couple of records with them. I'd like to take credit for it. I made them. No, I didn't. No, like, they're good people. Yeah, there were some bands on the label that I was like, that's not my thing, but hey.
Yeah, cool.
No one was punching anybody as far as I know.
Cool. Yeah, it was interesting to see how, I know your stickers and the posters for Adam and his package got some TV spots on in the background. Was that all the label that made that happen?
I think it must have been. I mean, I think that I can't remember if someone like I definitely didn't know about it until I remember my roommate yelled up at our house and was like, turn on the television, look at the OC! And we were like, oh my god, what's that? That's hilarious. But, I'll tell you, that earned me for a while a lot of street cred with the kids because I teach high school now.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember for a while they'd be like, dude, the thing's on. I was just like,
So what do you teach in high school? Like, what high school
I teach 10th grade chemistry, and then 11th and 12th grade physics, and some second chemistry stuff.
So the kids that you teach, they know about your punk rock life?
I think to a degree. I mean, it always seems like every year there are always a couple kids who ask me about it or sort of mention it.
Yeah.
And I think I would imagine most students kind of like Google whoever their new teacher is and find out what transgressions they've had in the past and stuff like that. So, yeah, some kids do, and I think I'm always happy to talk to kids about music, and I'm always amazed at how kids today, like, still know so many songs from the 80s, like, really obscure ones, like, I mean, maybe, I don't know if it's really obscure, but, like, if someone told me, without sort of showing me that, people know Let's Hear It For the Boy, or, like, these really strange songs that I remember in the 80s that I probably ripped off at some point, that I would have been surprised, but they do. And but I'm always interested in talking to kids about whatever music that they like. And so I'm still a huge fan. So it's cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's so much availability. You can access all the music in the world through the internet.
Yep.
Now, so
Elder Barge awaits everybody.
Yeah. Well, now you're still playing in Armalite, is that correct? Or is it not really as much?
Sort of. I mean, we're not really a functioning band.
Okay.
We are all still friends, but we weren't really ever much a functioning band.
Okay.
So we wrote songs, and but the other guys for a long time were in other bands that took up a lot of their time, and I was sort of, as I still am, have a ton of inertia and don't do much unless in that avenue anyway, unless someone else sort of like does it purposefully. So I think we had been around for like 7 or 8 years and had played like 4 shows. So we were a band, but not a very active one.
Okay.
But I am told we're going to have instrument-free band rehearsal without any instruments or music, but with food
Nice.
next week. So that'll be
Very
nice.
cool. Awesome. So is that the only musical project that you currently have going on, or do you have other things you work on?
No, I mean, I think that I tried to write too many songs in a short period of time, and I still play guitar every once in a while and just kind of pick it up and have an amp and guitar out. And I made a song for a student once, but I feel like I get much better returns finding other bands that play and write music that I'm gonna like better and is gonna be a little less effort intensive. My kids play music, so that's kind of fun. But I got my son Sam to play TNT by AC/DC with me once, but for the most part, they're not so interested in having me play with them. So
How old are your kids?
they are 9 and 12.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned new bands. What bands are you into right now, as far as newer bands?
Well, I like lots of different. I think there's a band called Future of the Left from Wales, who are you familiar with them?
I've listened to them. I haven't actively listened to them in a while, but I've listened to their albums before.
Okay, I think they are criminally underappreciated. Mm-hmm. Like they are, I think some of their records are just really, really great records in that they are catchy and aggressive, but they're not like they're not predictably catchy.
Okay.
But so I think the guy who in that band writes some really amazing songs. But also like metal, super heavy stuff. It seems like a strange thing in the way that it does, but I think that the 15th record by Napalm Death, he's awesome. I can see you are speechless.
You were breaking up a little bit. I heard Napalm Death, and that was about all I heard out of that.
Yes, the 15th record by Napalm Death is amazing! It is, it's so good. It's such a good record.
When did that come out? They've been a band for a long time.
It wasn't this last, I think it was maybe at the beginning of last year, or the year before that, maybe?
Okay.
It's great.
I've listened to Napalm Death, but I hadn't listened to newer Napalm Death, so I'll have to,
the newest Apex Predator Easy Meat. Great.
I will have to check that out.
Now
Very
it's
cool.
not forever. but it is really good. How about you? What are you into?
A little bit of everything. It's just such a hard question. I'm listening to Kendrick Lamar a lot.
Okay.
And Dillinger Escape Plan. I listen to...
Okay.
I'm all over the place, man, but
Hey.
Those are what I've been listening to this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand how it goes, totally.
Yeah, and there's weeks when that's totally different, but I'm all over the map.
Right. Cool.
Well, hey, it's been great talking to you. Not only do we share a name, you and I also share a birthday. I was born on January 14th as well.
Whoa! That is awesome.
Yeah.
You, me, Faye Dunaway. Who else?
Dave Grohl, I think. I'm pretty sure Dave
Really?
Grohl. Yeah.
That was not in the newspaper in the horoscope section when I was a kid and looked up, I guess. So that makes sense.
Oh yeah, and I thought of another question I wanted to ask you. So while you were touring with Adam and his package, did you have any experiences where you were touring with or playing shows with bands that you had kind of playing with your idols kind of situations, and what were some of those bands if you experienced that?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that I tended to kind of travel with bands that I was friendly with and were kind of felt like peers. I never did like a sort of big supporting like tour or anything like that. So, I mean, I did get to meet people that I was like, oh my god. I mean, like when I met Bar from No Idea, like the first time, I was like, oh my god, that's Bar, because growing up, like their fanzine was sort of one of those like classic things. Yeah, so I met and stayed with Ian, who was in the band Sicko. That was really cool for me. He was a super, super nice dude. So, and I think that that's also like the thing about punk rock that, there's kind of a lot of accessibility that even when it's someone who you may look up to, that it's kind of easy to get beyond that when you meet them, because I think a lot of people are pretty down to earth and recognize that, like, you're a person,
Yeah.
Not in a dismissive way, like, oh, you are just you no longer respect what you've done, but like, I think just in a way that are just like, oh, this is a human, and you can be friends even if I admire the things you do, and it's totally cool to say that too.
Yeah. Well, along those same lines, if you could go back in time and play a show with any band ever, who would it be? Or put together any bill from any band from any time period?
Well, there was a band called Carp, spelled K-A-R-P.
Okay.
Are you familiar with them?
I'm not, but I'm writing it down, so I'll look them up.
They have a record called Self-Titled LP that is great, and they were one of the bands that live, like, they were so good and fun, and they were great. So I would certainly love to, and I would be happy not to play, but I would love to see them again.
Cool.
So that would do.
Cool.
And then just friend bands that stuff's always great.
Yeah, cool. I just realized how ridiculous it is that I'm writing things down when I'm recording this whole conversation, and I'm gonna listen to it over and over and over again while I'm putting this together. But I still wrote it down, so
I get it. I do lots of things that don't make sense too. So.
All right, man. Well, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate you taking time out of your weekend to talk to me.
Thank you for reaching out and for having interest in doing this. But thank you very much, Adam.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of So I've Been Told. I am your host, Adam Kramer, and this week my guest is Adam Goren of Adam and His Package and Fracture and Armalite. This guy's been doing this punk rock thing for a long time, and we had a good time talking over Skype. That's why it's a couple of moments during the conversation where the sound gets a little choppy, but hopefully you can still understand enough to know what's going on. Adam took some time out of his weekend a couple weeks ago to chat with me, and I really enjoyed his perspective. He's somebody who's older than me, and I'm creeping up on 30. But as someone who's creeping up on 30, it's cool to hear someone who's a little bit further along in life than I am, who, even has a real regular job right now, but still sees so much value in punk and DIY culture. And I really hope you guys enjoy this interview. And before I play the interview, you are going to hear Anarchy Means I Litter by Adam and His Package. And you just heard Destination Not at Home by Armalite. Really hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with Adam. He is a great dude, and listen to his bands because they're super fun and super cool. Now next week I will be back, and my guest is Robbie from the band Hideout. He plays guitar and is the vocalist in that band. One of my current favorite Rochester bands. I think they're doing really cool stuff and putting out a really great new record. And that's really it for this week. Thanks so much for listening, and I will talk to you all next week.